Welcome to the Towers Underground podcast with Brandon White.
Brian Ferguson.
Oh my god. It still sounds weird.
You were getting better with it.
It's not okay anymore. I regressed. I'm
this
like
is,
Kevin.
This is like the first time he ever had a finger put in his ass, and he was like, okay, I'm really not okay with this. In fact,
Got
stop
past
it.
the first knuckle, and now I'm not okay with it again.
And then his dick was like, this is great. And he was like, no, it's not. Stop.
Brandon's over here talking from personal experience.
Little bit.
Allegedly.
Welcome to episode 1 of Peace, Love, and Towers Underground.
Oh, man.
No. Anyway. I don't get to anyway. We weren't talking about anything before.
Right.
I just wanted to anyway away from that.
I'm up to like episode 493 of Dragon Ball Z,
6,000.
where it begins the... Actually, no. I think I'm far enough into the Cell saga that I think that... Or into the Android saga, sorry. That I think they're about to discover Cell. Because they just found Future Trunks'
Time machine
that was broken down and like all mossy and shit, and I think that's where Cell came out of. And it's after the point where they realized that they accidentally created multiple timelines.
Dragon Ball Z, I still don't think wraps that shit up.
No,
it's left completely just like over here because Cell comes out because Cell. There's two. You have your two timelines, and the first one is established with Trunks and Gohan, and armless Gohan and whatnot. Because the androids aren't there in that timeline for whatever reason.
There's
Cell
only
takes,
2 androids in that timeline.
Yeah.
Cell takes that time machine to the past or whatever. I don't know.
The Android
Like there's
saga,
like a fork at one point, and it forks out. So he goes back to, and the fork doesn't happen, and he takes because I think the fork is
Does
Goku
he go to
dying,
a third
right?
timeline?
The fork is Goku dying. Goku dies,
Yeah.
and
Because
it
there
forks, and
there
Goku
are
doesn't die, and it forks again.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about that is whenever Trunks returns to his time, he goes back to his appropriate timeline and is able to just annihilate the androids like it's nothing.
That shouldn't have happened, because if he goes back, he should have gone back to the corrected timeline.
No, because he specifically went back to his timeline, the timeline that
He can only
happens
travel
naturally.
to his timeline.
Yeah. So they're basically setting it to where he can't change the future of his timeline, which makes sense in a way. There are multiple timelines. He could affect the timeline he went to in its future, but his timeline he can't change because he didn't go into the direct past of that timeline. He technically did, but he technically didn't.
I thought he went into the direct fork to right before the direct fork point of the timeline, to where if he changed it, it would have created that.
It created a new one, but he was only able to go
like
back
I said,
to
a
his.
la Back to the Future,
Right,
because
him going there is the catalyst for creating a second timeline.
If he had gone to the future of the timeline he created, there would have been 2 Trunkses, which would have caused a paradox. So,
well, no, he went back. He never went forward.
No, he eventually went back to his timeline.
Yeah,
well, I'm saying
there's
he went
actually
back
like
originally.
a
Right,
separate saga.
But
I think that's
when
like
when he would
Trunks
return
thing.
back, he can only go back to a timeline that he was already in that was ruined.
Right.
It's still not making any sense.
He
It
makes
doesn't.
Like that's what I'm saying.
It's basically to eliminate the possibility of there being a paradox.
Right.
He can only go back to the timeline that's existed. So the moment he went back and changed it, he's created a new timeline. The timeline that he is from is completely unalterable.
I mean, if we're following those rules, which arguably are stupid, I don't think they make any sense, but they're stupid.
I
And
think
yeah,
that
I
they
guess
make the most sense, to be honest with you.
I agree.
But I also don't really believe in like free will.
Before we stray away from it, I'd like to point out my favorite plot hole from Dragon Ball Z. The whole thing, my favorite plot hole.
Dr. Gero.
Dr. Gero. Dr. Gero was able to collect DNA samples and gather data on all the warriors from all their battles to build Cell, including data he would have had to have collected on Namek specifically, and he was not there.
Yeah, because he knew about the Super Saiyan stuff, and he built Cell specifically to be stronger than that, but he wouldn't know what that threshold point would have been.
Yeah.
Because I don't think after coming back...
After
coming back, I think he does come back Super Saiyan. Like, he instant transmissions down and he is a Super Saiyan. So he would have to have been watching with scanners at that moment. But I don't think
it wouldn't be a fully powered up Super Saiyan.
Yeah, it wouldn't be like...
And it wouldn't make sense that his androids would be prepared for that level, which they do touch on briefly.
He was also able to get
Androids aren't
Frieza's...
prepared for that level.
The other thing, though, is he wasn't able to get Frieza's DNA or data. That was only on Namek, but he also had that. So he technically was able to get data for Cell that wouldn't have been available to him whatsoever.
They didn't take anything from the
Well,
ship.
that
the
Cell-
ship, the armor was on the ship, so there could have been skin flakes from Frieza, feasibly. But
Maybe,
I mean,
yeah.
you're having to draw
Yeah,
really.
you're really stretching there. It's possible, but everything from now. Granted, I haven't rewatched all of Kai, so maybe they addressed that. But in the original run, there was
They're not thinking that. They're not thinking as hard as we are at all.
well because I mean he was able to get combat techniques from Frieza, which I mean he would have to observe those.
See, I don't remember that part, but I haven't gotten that far, and I don't remember that far since the last time that I watched it, because the last time that I watched it was like 15 years ago or more.
I
Yeah.
still think Cell's the best villain in the original, like
Cell
in the
is a
Dragon
good
Ball
villain.
Z thing. I enjoyed Cell. the
Yeah,
best.
Cell's a pretty compelling villain. Cell or Frieza, probably.
Cell was just walking hubris.
Boo was kind of bullshit.
Boo was bullshit.
Well, Boo was like the unstoppable force that you really didn't like. There was no human. Obviously, there was no humanization to Boo because
Right.
he was a monster.
Yeah.
Whereas Frieza and Cell, you can understand kind of where they're coming from. Cell was made to destroy, and Frieza's a conqueror.
Right.
So
They make sense.
you have
Yeah.
parallels to draw from in your real world experiences, and you can try and find something.
It's
What
funny,
doesn't make any sense is
Vegeta
that-
as a villain was like this manifest destiny thing.
Yeah, definitely. Birthright. The
Yeah.
sense of birthright.
Exactly.
Raditz doesn't make any sense from a standpoint of, like, why is he there compared to Vegeta or
Literally,
Nappa?
like, go to this planet. That's where Kakarot is.
Are you saying like
and
he's the weakest? Like he's first, like undeniably the weakest of
Right,
them. So
like-
why does he even exist out
Right.
of all the Saiyans that they could have kept?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Well,
it's
yeah,
not
but-
even that he's the weakest; it's that he is so much weaker that
part-
they can just grow little beings that are
you have
as
to remember
powerful.
that just like Goku, Raditz wasn't on Planet Vegeta when it was destroyed. That's the only reason that he's still around to be doing stuff. So it was more of a thing of they've subjugated what was left, and he just happened to exist. So
Yeah,
he's
that
under
would
their
make-
command.
and I mean-
then what's more weird is when you get like Broly, like we were talking about the movies earlier before we started recording.
I don't talk about the movies.
I don't
Yeah.
know anything about the Brawly movie. I haven't watched anything about Brawly other than the abridged version, and I don't remember.
So
any of it.
Broly's supposed to be the legendary Super Saiyan, and he's a whole different class of Super Saiyan.
It's called Legendary Super Saiyan.
Yeah, but I'm saying
Because of
specifically,
course it
it's something that technically speaking, Goku and Vegeta can't achieve because he is of rare blood. So his Super Saiyan is this just massive, bulky, ridiculous Super Saiyan.
It's like the Hulk,
Yeah.
essentially. Like he becomes the Hulk.
Now, here's what I never understood about Brawly. Does he exist at the same timeline, or like at the same time as Vegeta and Goku? Because
So
they
he-
make a very, very good or a clear point of saying that there has never been, or that there hasn't been another Super Saiyan for thousands of years or whatever.
And suddenly
Yeah.
there's like 3.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Four Goten, 5 Trunks,
Th-
6 if you count super like young Trunks and old Trunks,
And
and
then
then
7
7 if you count
Gohan.
Broly. Like it's ridiculous.
yeah, so it's like in Dragon Ball Z Abridged, when Vegeta was like, "What the fuck is this? A goddamn Super Saiyan bargain bin sale?" Whenever Trunks and Goten both went Super Saiyan, he was just like, "This is fucking ridiculous. Everyone's doing it now."
Yeah, I kind of, or I watched a video not that long ago that was talking about how Frieza kind of broke the power structure of everybody.
Yeah.
In the
There's
sense that,
definitely like this takeoff point. At
yeah,
Frieza.
there's definitely a vertical asymptote that happens there.
Yeah, the scaling got really fucked at that
Well,
point.
if you take it from Dragon Ball all the way to the end of Z, like it's a pretty, it's not a huge steep incline, but you're going across the x-axis at a not a large incline rate, and like you said with Frieza, it just almost at a 90-degree angle shoots up because you're like nothing can beat him. That's
Well, see,
the whole-
the thing.
Well, it starts at Dragon Ball Z at the beginning of it.
you have
Either
Raditz who kinda
Piccolo
comes up.
or Goku are the strongest
and they're 1,000 and
beings
1,200. That's their power levels.
at the peak, and
Yeah.
that's
I
when
think
fighting
Piccolo
Raditz.
was stronger. I want to say Piccolo was
Piccolo
just a
was
little bit
stronger.
stronger. Like it was decimal points at
And that was just by virtue of the fact that Goku kind of took some time off from training during those years. He started a family, whereas Piccolo was mostly sent. So technically, the natural ability of Goku was still apparent because he maintained relative parity with Piccolo
Right.
without actually training quite as much as him. Now, the interesting thing about the scaling, what I think personally was with the Frieza thing, is like there hadn't been Super Saiyans for a really long time. And Goku only managed to do it just because Frieza managed to unlock that rage aspect for him. And then the only reason Vegeta was able to do it was out of rage because he couldn't accept the fact that Goku could do it and he couldn't.
Right, it's mostly canon that rage is what unlocks his Super Saiyan ability.
Yeah.
Except more until you get to Gohan, who
Gohan
unlocks it
happened.
just through sheer...
Gohan was...
Training?
Gohan was an emotional thing,
angry.
too.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was training, but it was also emotional.
How much he hates his dad.
Well, not that, but...
Goku realized how he did it, and then Vegeta, I assume he talked to him or listened to him on how he did it, so he's like, maybe this is it. So if I keep poking at Gohan...
I don't think that Vegeta knew how... But since his training was pushing himself to his already existing physical peak, and since that motivation was nothing but pure rage, he was able to reach that next level.
That's what I was saying. Like Goku listened to what happened to Vegeta, and obviously knew what happened to him, so he could feasibly
that makes sense.
connect the dots to try and make it happen again.
But then you get to like younger or when you get to like younger Trunks and
at that
Goten,
point, I think it's genetic. Because Gohan did it through training, but like he hits Super Saiyan level 2 purely emotionally, just like Goku and Vegeta hit Super Saiyan level 1 emotionally.
Right.
But Goten and Trunks, they hit it at such a young age and not without any real emotional stimuli.
Right.
So I really do think because they were both conceived after Super Saiyan was a thing, that basically you would think altered the DNA of Vegeta and Goku. So it was probably genetic at that point.
I don't have any better theories. It sounds right. Like we're analyzing it.
It's the best I've got. I've seen a lot of Dragon Ball Z over the years, and I think that makes the most sense to me.
That's about the closest thing to a logical explanation.
It makes way more sense than 9 out of the 11 movies.
Yeah, I'll
what
give you that.
two are we?
Well, Battle of the Gods and Resurrection of F 100% makes sense with the timeline since they launched Super.
Okay. Well, I think the first 3 make sense.
The Broly movie makes no fucking sense.
Well, I'm talking about...
the first Broly movie.
I'm talking about Tree of Life, Dead Zone, and World's Strongest.
Yeah.
Those 3 I still take as might be partially canon, or parts of them could have happened.
Was World's Strongest the Turles movie?
Tree of Life.
That
World's Strongest is the one where like they fight like this robot guy.
I can't remember. There's so fucking many of them.
World's Strongest is the weakest of the 3.
Is Goku in the Dead Zone movie?
Yes.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay. So
They
that
steal
timeline doesn't make
Gohan.
any sense.
Which is why it doesn't make any sense because he should have been dead for that one. I
Right,
believe.
because all that would, or the only timeline that would make sense is that if that happened between Raditz and
it
Vegeta.
happens. Yeah.
It happens before. It happens before because Gohan's still young. He still has the ball on his head. They're trying to find the ball that's on his head.
In that case, it doesn't make any sense because
it would have happened before, and
It would
Piccolo
have
and him still aren't cool.
Right, and it's expressly noted that they haven't seen, or that nobody has met Gohan up
At the beginning of the show.
until Raditz arrives.
Yeah. So that's part of the reason that one doesn't fit.
I'm confused. I don't.
The relationships between all the characters are the reason that
Oh
movie
yeah,
makes no
because
sense.
Krillin helps them. I keep forgetting that Krillin was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I still like it. It's my favorite.
I mean, they're
It's
not
closer to making sense than most of them.
Yeah, it works, but there's little things that don't.
No. I mean, they're still fun, and they can stand up on their own fairly
Yeah.
well. But the problem is that if you try to reconcile them with the story that exists, it's just
not
not
possible.
doable.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the movies don't make sense because of timeline discrepancies, and that's an example.
I don't know. Did it catch me? I don't see. We've gone around in circles with this so many times. Is this on air? Because I said that they parallel the movies parallel.
Yeah, they
the
parallel
sagas.
what's happening.
So you essentially can take a movie and parallel and match
Right,
it
but the
up
problem
with
is
saga.
that they would have to exist like in between a fight.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying like the movies. Like if you
There
just,
literally are movies like that.
Right.
Where,
So like in order for the Dead Zone to make any sense, they would have to stop fighting Raditz, go fight Garlic Jr.,
And then come back.
back to fighting Raditz.
No, I'm just saying, like, if you take the shows or the series and
Mm-hmm.
you roll it up on this timeline, and then you take the actual what's it called,
I think
the
World's
movies, and you roll it up on this timeline, like they kind of match up in terms of what's happening and who they're fighting and what the
I
abilities.
think
of
World's
the people that they're
Strongest
fighting.
is
Oh
actually the
yeah,
one
their
that
abilities line up with everything else. It's just everything else doesn't.
I think World's Strongest is the one that happens between Earth and Namek, and
Yeah.
Goku is present for it. So that one makes no sense for several reasons.
Right.
And then it just it gets worse from there. And then you get like BoJack. BoJack could not have feasibly happened. That one has to have happened after King Kai's.
BoJack doesn't make sense because
King Kai's planet has to have been blown up for him to be free, and Future Trunks is there, and those two things don't line up.
Yeah.
So,
When would Cooler have taken place?
Cooler was the Frieza replacement.
Right,
so...
I know that Cooler was the Freezer replacement, or...
Cooler would have been Android Saga, I believe.
Okay. And then there's the return of Cooler, which would have been...
Boo.
Also
like
that.
before Boo Saga, between
There's-
Cell and Boo. I'm pretty sure. It's been a while since I've seen all the movies. I just remember distinctly how fucked up the timeline is if you include those movies. So for the most part, they don't really make any sense. They're still entertaining, some better than others, but trying to reconcile them with the actual timeline is absolutely
Garbage.
ridiculous.
Total garbage.
Which is why whenever Battle of the Gods was coming out, I was like, I don't know about this, and then I found out about Super, and I was like, we'll see.
So, from my understanding, what happened with Battle of the Gods and Super is they made Super, and they did it with a different animation studio. So, a lot of the animation was total garbage. You can Google this and like find the faces, and it looks like shit.
Yeah.
So it's like it takes a huge step backwards compared to the animation quality at the end of Dragon Ball Z, and really, to be fair, all of Dragon Ball Z.
Which is interesting because Akira Toriyama's art itself has really gotten better over the years because he's done all of the art for the Dragon Quest series.
Right.
And as those games have come out, because I've played all of them over the years, like the artwork has just gotten better and better. It looks like watching a Dragon Ball Z with perfect animation.
Right.
So, seeing it now, it's almost like trying to replicate the older style to make it flow.
Well,
which is having to diminish the quality, which is kind of weird.
Well, if you're not familiar with the way that animation is done, they make most of the cell, or they make like a chunk of the animation cells, and then they usually outsource it out to a third-party company who fills in the rest of the animation.
Yeah, the filler frames are what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That look
Right.
garbage.
So
It's
the
like
company
Sailor
that they
Moon.
had sent it out to was a different company that they had usually sent it out to, just because they were trying to put it out quickly, because they wanted another Dragon Ball series to come out, and because of that company, it looked really, really awful. So Resurrection of F and Battle of the Gods ended up having to be resent out and reanimated, and those ended up being the episodes that turned into Super. It's the HD quality of what it is.
Yeah, that's what they did for Sailor Moon as well. Is that they have the
Are you talking about Sailor Moon Crystal?
the new Sailor Moon, whatever the Sailor Moon is. They put them out, and it's weekly, and it's like okay
bi-weekly.
quality. Well, I'm just saying, like they put them out and it's okay.
The
quality,
original
and then
Japanese was
they-
poor quality, and then when they went to dub it, they did it in...
They do it. They the Blu-ray releases and the HD releases.
That was one of the biggest
are-
complaints with it was the
fixed,
art,
yeah.
but also I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Sailor Moon Crystal was actually very low budget. They wanted to relaunch it because of the success of Dragon Ball Kai. They were like, well, let's give kind of a retouch, a retelling that's more condensed, because Sailor Moon was also a fairly long series. Like I watched it as a kid, both the American and then later went on and watched the original Japanese with subtitles. There were a lot of episodes. The American actually cut out a lot of stuff, mostly because what a lot of people don't know, because they've only seen the American version, Sailor Moon was very graphically violent. Like those girls died some pretty brutal deaths. So they decided to redo it, and they didn't know if there was a market for it, so it was very low budget, but it was very well received, except for the fact that the art kind of eye bleed to look at. Like it even bothered me to watch it. So I haven't seen the dub version because I only started watching it when it was subtitled on Hulu. So I'm hoping that looks better. You actually have given me more reason
whenever
to-
they release the new seasons and stuff on Blu-ray, whenever the Blu-ray releases come out, that's when they get touched up. So
Yeah.
it's been long enough to where you could go back and have them, and it's like they don't even exist anymore. The ones before don't even exist anymore. They're just for syndication. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
They're
There you
for
go.
syndication.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting and exciting because that was like the only thing that was wrong with it, because the
It's one of the
storytelling was better,
animation.
the voice acting was better, the flow was better, but the art was just really hard to deal with.
So, I'm learning this a lot about anime recently. A lot of animes are made with a story in mind, in the sense of they have, or from the beginning, they have a beginning, middle, and
Yeah, they
an end.
conceptualize the whole thing from the launch,
Right.
pretty much.
Or Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon are kind of outliers in that sense, in that they were recurring because they're based off of the manga, and they were ongoing series as they were being
So
animated
they
into
had
the
to
show.
fill a lot to keep up. Like, you know, they would get to a certain point in the manga, and then the show would catch up, so they'd have to do filler episodes to kind of tide the story over until they could come out with new.
Well, you got a lot of stuff like that, like the popular Shonen Jump animes that were happening now, like your Naruto, your One Piece.
Yeah, I mean, I
like
feel
that.
like it's becoming
Similar-
more of a
similar
common.
concept.
I feel like it's becoming more common now in the sense that it's become a little bit more mainstream in the or stateside, so there is a little bit more demand for it.
Yeah.
As opposed to at the time, it was pretty much people who were, if you were an American fan, you were going to seek it out in Japanese just because there wasn't really another way to get it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, especially for me as a kid, because I kind of got on board with it, you know, from a fairly young age in the 90s. And it was a lot harder to get a hold of and consume back then. I mean,
Right, like,
on American TV, you had Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, Escaflowne, and not much else for a long time.
Yeah, I mean,
Whatever
Toonami kind of
Yeah.
changed the whole demographic in that sense, in that they kind of were the tastemakers of popular anime in America.
Yeah, because then they started rolling out stuff like Ronin Warriors and then Cowboy Bebop, which was, I think, truthfully,
Ronin
everyone's
Warriors.
first introduction to a really good anime. Like, we were enjoying the stuff we got, and then they showed us Cowboy Bebop, and we were like, oh,
This can be an art form.
yeah. Like, you know, it changed everything because it was such a well-written, amazing show. Musically, story, character, you know, design.
The dub wasn't bad either.
No, the dub was great. I mean,
think that's
when
what
you got
really
Steve
elevates
Blum
it.
as your main character, like, you can't lose. Like, the
Right.
guy's a great voice actor.
Because, I mean, Dragon Ball Z is a good series and all, and I mean, it definitely is fun. From storytelling, it's borderline incomprehensible.
You try to explain it to the uninitiated, and they're going to be like, "That sounds like the dumbest fucking thing ever." And you're like, "Right?
It
That's
kinda
great."
It is.
You're like, "I just love this because they fight for like 5 minutes and then just stare at each other for 20."
I think that Dragon Ball Z, or Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, made a lot of sense to American viewers just because we were used to things along the lines of Transformers and G.I. Joe, which
Yeah.
were kind of ham-fisted, and quite frankly, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z were a better version of early American cartoons, which realistically were mostly Korean-made cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, the narrative was really only. It took a backseat to the whole thing, and as far as American cartoons went, like there was
Right,
not
I mean-
much continuity to things.
If you look back at American cartoons, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Ninja Turtles end up being the ones that really kind of stick out in my mind. They really don't hold up nearly as well as stuff like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon,
Yeah.
a lot of the popular anime at the time. And I think one of the bigger reasons for that is that we didn't have the same toy market that they did.
Right.
So when you look at, and they're definitely not the capitalist mega society that America is.
Well, now they are.
Well,
not
now
so
they
much
are,
back
but at the
then,
time,
though. Yeah.
no, not at all.
There were still.
So when you
upswing.
go back and you watch those popular American cartoons, they play as bad commercials for toy sales.
Basically, yeah. Whereas the Japanese were focusing more on the narrative storytelling. And even though Dragon Ball Z was, you know, like incomprehensible at times, and like the movies and stuff didn't really make sense with it, it's still focused on. They were moving a story forward, and there was a lot of craziness just to get young guys to
Right.
watch the show. But it still carried a narrative. So, and that kind of introduced a young audience to following a story for dramatic effect.
If I understand the history correctly, which I've been reading a lot of it, and I have a handful of friends who are really, really interested in the history of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. The original Dragon Ball series was more of a fantasy where it was based off of the Chinese legend of the monkey god.
Yeah, Journey to the West.
Journey to the West.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it told very much a hero's journey of a young boy gaining his strength in a fantasy setting. Everything was very much fantastical. There really was not a lot of sci-fi elements in it. You had androids pop up from time to time, but that was a very, very small
Yeah,
portion of it.
it was a comedic telling of a classic tale.
Right, and then when you get into Dragon Ball Z, it seems to me that they wanted to continue this story, and they didn't have a good way of continuing this story as a fantasy. You already have a character who is the strongest in the world, and quite frankly, at this point, there's no going back from that. He's defeated every invincible enemy on Earth, so the logical leap from there is go to space, and quite frankly, at that point, you have to turn the show into a sci-fi.
Yeah. In fact, there's a good kind of comparison there when we talked about the ridiculous scaling that started in Z and really took off at Frieza. The final battle in Dragon Ball between Goku and Piccolo, I mean, Piccolo broke every bone in Goku's body, and Goku basically had to like fall on him to defeat him. Like, it was pathetic. Like, I mean, they brutally destroyed each other, and that's with power levels that were a fraction of what they were already at the end of Vegeta.
High hundreds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's estimated that at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, the strongest people on Earth are in the high hundreds.
Yeah.
You get into Frieza, and Frieza's ultimate form claims to be about 1 million or something like that. And at that point, there was no going back to any kind of reasonable scaling. And from there, storytelling makes no sense in any real way, because you have the Z fighters who are at the peak human ability, and quite frankly, the fact that Yamcha, Tien, Krillin are even there.
And Krillin still manages to scale with them for a while, and it's just like, this makes no sense. Like, you can take Goku and Vegeta and Piccolo, and you can keep scaling them, and you can make that make sense, but having having Krillin, Yamcha, Tien, and Chaozu even remotely hang in any battle from that point onward is comical at best.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing that made the most sense to me about Dragon Ball Z was the beginning of the Buu Saga, or not the Buu Saga, the World Tournament Saga.
Yeah.
Where Krillin just sits out. He's like, look, I'm not going to win this. I have no chance of winning this. Yeah. I'm retired as a fighter because, quite frankly, if anything else or if we get anything remotely like what we've had thrown at us recently, I'm just going to die a bunch of times, and we just don't need to use the Dragon Balls.
He looked inward and realized that there was not a living Saiyan that would care enough about his death to benefit from it, so there was no point in dying anymore.
My favorite part of the World Tournament thing, because they have a whole build-up and, like, 18s in there, and they're all like, punch the thing, they'll see how strong you are, to see where you get receded, and, like, Vegeta, like, looks at them, and they're just like, don't do it, Vegeta, and Vegeta's like, and like flicks the thing, and it like, and Vegeta's just like,
it just destroys the machine.
It's like, he's like, this is fucking stupid. I want to fight for real. This is bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, that, little things about that
I hated that part of that saga because it was so ridiculous that I understand why Goku would be there, because Goku just enjoys fighting. That's his whole character. But the fact that Vegeta would even bother showing up with any more... The only thing that makes Vegeta make any sense in that is that he wants to fight Goku.
That's what I'm saying. It's the only time he can actually fight Goku in a setting in which Goku's going to try and probably try his hardest.
It's the only time that he can get Goku to agree to fight him again.
Yeah.
Short of massacring the Earth.
Yeah. Which he does anyway.
And
in the end, he ends up going crazy.
Well, I really like the fact, though, over the entire arc, not just like the sub-arcs of each season, but like the entire Dragon Ball Z arc of the series entirely, is like Vegeta has the best development and growth out of every character.
He does.
He ends Dragon Ball Z as the most noble character, more so than Goku could ever be, because he literally risks his own existence when fighting Buu.
You have Piccolo, and I think if you take Dragon Ball and you take Dragon Ball and Z, I think Piccolo is up there.
Piccolo's one of the most noble up until you get to the Buu Saga, and then at that point,
he's peaked by that point. But Vegeta is literally, he goes from being, I'm going to fight and kill anybody. I'm the Prince of Saiyans. No one's better than me. I'm a villain.
He's a family man. Yeah.
To becoming a family man who came back, in ghost form to fight Buu, fully knowing that if he died then, he was done, and still managed to risk his life for Goku to have a chance to beat Buu. And, literally at any moment could have been completely wiped out of existence in that fight, but still did it for the sake of everyone that he cared about, which was a really, really cool development for a character like him, because early on I fucking hated him, and by the end I was 100% behind Vegeta.
This is a character that straight up is working that straight up destroys Nappa without a second thought, and is literally trying to eradicate the only other person left in his race.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of those characters that did a face turn like no other.
Yeah.
And amazingly was still, it's kind of like whenever, it's an inverse of like when The Rock, was a heel, and even after his heel turn, he was still so popular, he would get huge pops, like at every single Raw, every SmackDown, every pay-per-view.
I thought I said this yesterday. Triple H was the one I
and Triple H is another example like that. And even
Triple H is a very likable heel.
after Vegeta's face turn, like he could still have heelish moments, But no matter what, like, he just got to a point where not liking Vegeta wasn't an option. Like, you couldn't not like him because everything he would do he was such a perfect foil to Goku. Because Goku was so fucking whimsical and so, like, head in the clouds about everything. Vegeta was so rational. They were two sides of a coin by the end of it in a way that was you never would have seen coming.
No.
And for a show that was flying by the seat of its pants with the narrative at times, like to at least come to that point during the Buu saga was absolutely brilliant, I thought.
Yeah.
And that's probably giving a lot of credit to Dragon Ball Z, for story writing. But I think that if nothing else was done well, that was done perfectly.
100%. Mm-hmm. I saw John Wick 2.
How'd you like it? I really loved it. I thought that it was fantastic as a sequel.
Yeah, no, I think it's almost better than the first one. I need to see it again, but I walked out of that movie. I wasn't even out of the theater yet, and I was like, this shit might be better than the first one. And if I'm sitting there saying it as the credits are rolling, I'm just like, this is probably better than the first one. I just can't admit it. I'm just like, this is too hard for me to say because I hate sequels.
First one, I left the theater saying, please, dear God, don't make a sequel that ended the way that it needs to end.
Yeah.
And the second one, I left the theater saying,
all right,
I really want another one.
This needs to happen again for sure. You haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it yet.
This is being recorded a couple weeks from the release, so if you haven't seen it, go out and see it. Give the movie the money that it needs. They probably won't make a third one, but this is one of those things.
Oh no, they're definitely going to make a third one.
This is one of those franchises that needs to be supported for sure. So go out and watch. Go out and spend your money on it.
All I can say is it's a good thing the Wachowskis didn't do it.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about Keanu trying to come back and do a fourth one, that he's open to it, and I'm just like, no.
The quote was he would be open to it if the Wachowskis are open to it.
That's what I'm saying. So he was like, yeah, I'll do it.
Seems like they're open to just about anything.
Personally, I think that if they're going to make another one, they just need to make basically a shot-for-shot remake of the first trilogy, because the whole point is that everything just resets.
Yeah. Just do it again.
I
mean,
that'd be really cool. It'd actually be.
Keanu Reeves is at least aged well enough that it would be reasonable to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. The part with the mirrors, the mirror part, I really got a lot of that Bruce Lee Enter the Dragon kind of feel, and I didn't know if they were paying homage to it, but I was like,
I think that they might have been,
because that's what I was keying out on special. I don't know. The whole movie was.
It's fun. It's one of those few movies that. The first one did well because they had a low budget for what it was, and they did everything that they needed to do very well. They wanted to make a loud action movie, and they had stunt coordinators as directors. So you were able to get that done very, very well because the people who were in charge of making it were the people who have the know-how and the skill to make it.
On top of the fact that Keanu Reeves just likes to do that kind of shit.
Right, Keanu Reeves
he's an enthusiast.
Right, he's the perfect person to put in that kind of a role because he puts in
he's done the choreography for this endless times, it seems, in his personal time. Like, have you ever gone on YouTube or anything and looked at videos of him actually just doing it?
Yeah.
It's so cool to watch. He's so adept at it that the choreography for the movies looks so natural for him because it is natural for him, and that's one of the most impressive things about it. That's why I was okay with the sequel, because I knew that if nothing else, the choreography for the fight scenes was going to be on point.
I was worried about the sequel that studios were going to take it over and turn it into garbage.
Better,
make it
more.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
But it's just the first one, but longer and with better set pieces.
Are there dogs in this one?
Yes.
Okay.
There's dog.
Yeah.
It's just more set pieces.
I am willing to spoil this one thing just because I think it's important and it definitely eases a lot of people's nerves. The dog doesn't die.
That was my concern.
Exactly.
That little beagle puppy that could have been Kevin.
Yeah. The dog has a small the dog definitely, his role is hilarious.
Yeah.
But beyond that, instead of making it a bigger, more convoluted plot i.e. like Transformers or something along those lines.
Just anything.
They just, pretty much any action movie.
Yeah.
They did what they do, but better.
See, my favorite thing from the first movie, and I want to think that a lot of people feel this way, is the storytelling in the regard that everything that happened was parallel to the world that we're in. It's happening in the shadows. We just don't see it.
If you love that,
You
you're
get
gonna-
that.
Yeah, like
More.
the world. Like,
It's
they
like this
literally-
is all happening in Manhattan, and nobody notices it because that's just how in the shadows this whole thing is. No matter how dramatic with the fights and everything, like nobody notices it.
Like John
It's
Wick
great.
1 was a story, like it was a self-contained story, and you can take that and say, "Watch this. This is going to be awesome." John Wick 2 builds that story into a world. It is now it is now a universe. It is now something that you can create inside of.
You get an idea of how big this underground world is.
So they could turn this into a Bourne saga kind of thing.
They can do that. I want a video game. I left saying I want a game. I want a Hitman-esque Batman, maybe like
Like an
combat
Arkham
style.
City type
I want
thing.
Hitman in most of the stuff, but like a Batman in terms of like the combat, because you really that's a lot of it. But yeah, just set me down in a mission, give me my objective, and let me.
That's
do
true
how
because
I
for
want.
for there to be so many guns and so many gunfights, it's a lot of melee gunfighting.
Yeah.
So that would actually work with an Arkham style battle
So
system.
I left the theater going, I want a game. I 100% want a game. This is something that I would think would flourish in a game. Like,
See or watch the movie, and I'll say this, and I think that Thackeray will probably agree with me. The subway scene is the perfect
where
example
it's
of
just like,
what you're talking
yeah,
about.
like you're. It's. Yeah, I that's something that I watched. Is that it's with Common, and that part is good to watch to see who's doing what in the choreography.
Wait, Common's in this movie?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
could never. Yeah, Common puts in a good performance.
He's
like he
a
always
surprisingly
does.
good action star.
I love it when
Because he was in Smoking Aces, and he was fantastic.
yeah, I love it when hip hop artists are really good. And
Ruby Rose puts in a decent performance. Nothing to write home about, but it was good enough.
did you break somebody's heart?
I don't care. I was watching Keanu Reeves a lot because I do that in movies where I don't actually watch what's happening. I kind of watch the back parts of the screen or parts of what's happening. I could never tell when Keanu had a person in for him, and he didn't. There was a lot of part where he said he didn't have anybody in, but when they did,
There's
make
a
the
handful
switches,
of parts where you have to.
I was like, oh my god, I don't know if this. I really think this is him. I
That's
was
some
sitting
really
there
good
being like, this is him.
cinematography then.
There's a whole like 20-minute section where they're in a room full of mirrors and a hallway full of mirrors, and I was looking at his face to see if they ever switched, and he never switched. That was him the whole time, and I was like, what the fuck is happening?
As a fan, I really hope that, and I think that it is making a change in the way that we film action movies. Because for the longest time, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat in action movies, for the past decade and a half,
Bourne was the one that really changed
Yes.
that from there. So like you said with Bourne, like Bourne changed it from how it was with like Bond before, and now I think John Wick is going to be another point at which it's like this is when it changed in action films.
right, and to be specific on what Thackeray is talking about, Bourne was a movie where Matt Damon is not a great hand or he's not great at combat.
Just try
It's
not to blaspheme Matt Damon.
He's a good actor, but fighting is not what he's great at. So to kind of combat that, the Bourne series kind of created the past several years of cinematography for action films, where you have quick shots where you never really see where the hit's happening. Everything's kind of done in shaky cam.
Yeah.
You don't. It's very kind of disorienting, and I guess the purpose of it is because a fight is supposed to be disorienting.
Yeah. When it first came out, it was really like revolutionary. It actually gave me a bit of motion sickness, and I was like, "This
Right.
is awesome," because like you're not
It's
going
like
to
you're
really
in-
tell what's going
yeah.
to happen, and then like as it kept happening, you're like, "Okay, this is just annoying."
Right.
Like, as the years happen, I guess as the years
Right.
went on with movies, it's
So now we're going back to kind of, I would almost call it like the Kung Fu
long
movie.
cuts where they
version.
try not to cut as
Right.
much as possible. They're going to run through the choreography as much as possible. And
We're going to keep the film, or we're going to keep the camera still. You're going to see where the hits land, and you get to see a fight happening.
I think that's good with Keanu. Of all actors, Keanu Reeves really fits this because we already talked about the gun choreography, but he has had martial arts training
Yeah.
in the past too. So I mean, you combine because John Wick does martial arts to a degree for close quarters combat.
Oh, yeah.
Gun
There-
fu, I don't know really what to call it, but it's
Gun fu is
There's
a
a
good name for it.
combination of a bunch of things.
yeah, like it's like a lot of, and I don't like a lot
There's
of this
grappling.
Is,
There's
yeah,
there's
the close like things,
judo
you know.
style fighting.
There's a lot of throwing and
Yeah.
punching and elbows and stuff like that. So I don't Krav.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's like judo and Krav Maga. Yeah, kind of
be
a fluid mix of the
Granted,
two.
I'm not martial arts aficionado, so we might be just completely pulling shit out of thin air. like idiots.
Luckily, I know just enough about those movies to know that is an appropriate assessment.
And part of the reason why I think that this is actually going to be a mark of like how these things change for kind of a period of time in cinematography is you're already seeing it happening in things outside of this specific film. I mean,
Bourne changed actually because of John Wick. The last Bourne actually changed the
and
way
I hear
it
that
did
the
it.
fighting wasn't great in that one.
I mean, I do like that the Bourne movies do that kind of that shaky cam disorienting thing.
I mean, that's
because,
the Bourne thing. So,
well, because anybody that's ever been in a fight, like I know for a fact you've been in a fight before.
Yeah,
I mean, you've never been in one.
No.
Fight. A lot of people don't
We
realize.
are amazed to this day that no one has punched me.
A lot of people always think like if I get into a fight, I'm going to do this or that. Everything happens so fast, and everything really is so disorienting.
muscle memory is
It's
what it comes down to.
everything is purely reactionary. Like you don't really get to put a lot of thought into it unless you're boxing somebody, and even then you take a couple hits to the head. You're not quite as clear on things. But in just like a sudden like, oh, this person attacked me, or I'm suddenly fighting a person, which a couple seconds ago I was scratching my ass. Like everything happens so fast. Like it's a completely disorienting experience. And if you're on the losing end, it's very disorienting.
The part where they're fighting him in Comet, and it felt like it went on for forever. It was 3 or 4 minutes,
so long.
where they're just like on the ground and they're like
They're
grabbing
moving.
onto their
It's a
hands
lot of
and they're
moving.
moving around, and I'm just like, oh my god, how long is this going to keep going? Where it just felt like all
Builds
one
anxiety,
shot.
I'm sure.
Yeah, like it's
Yeah.
the whole movie like had me literally on the edge of my seat. And I don't go. The last time I was that thrilled to be in a theater and watching something was Fury Road. Was Mad Max, and I was like, oh my god, this is fucking awesome.
That movie was
like,
intense,
you know,
too.
like
Yeah.
it's. So it's
We have a new one coming up on us, I think, don't we?
I don't know that anybody's talking about a new... Well, I know that there is talk of more Mad Max, but I don't know how far into pre-production they are.
yeah, because
I think it's still just announced and not even in pre-production yet. But I mean, when you're looking at these kind of fight scenes, you're already seeing it happen in things that are putting attention into the fight scenes. Pretty much every Marvel series or every Netflix Marvel series that's come out so far has had one of these long shots, which they're not easy to do because it's all choreography based. So I mean, you need a minimum of 2 people, and if you look at like the Daredevil scene, it's something like it's almost like 20 people in a single fight in a long or in a 5-minute long shot.
he's going up the stairwell, so you're talking
Yeah,
down
yeah.
the stairwell, and it's just kicking the shit out of everybody. And it doesn't seem like the camera's going to cut.
Right, like it starts at the
Yeah.
hallway and it ends outside of the building.
Yeah.
That reminds me of that scene in True Detective, which you pointed out to me. Like, there's a scene where the camera is not going to cut, and then it starts in the house and goes out and then goes down through the alley and over a fence and around the neighborhood.
What are we talking about specifically? I don't remember off the top of my head.
Oh god, it was in it was like episode 6 of season 1 of True Detective.
I'd have to go back and watch it. But I remember pointing that out to you and being like, you need to watch this because cinematography ever since... Well, Breaking Bad is what put me onto it because I really haven't watched movies or watched stuff like that. But I watched Breaking Bad and I was like, they're doing something different with this. And I've gone back and watched stuff or gone forward since then and watched stuff. So I like to watch stuff like that. So True Detective is something that really
That was
did
one
a lot of stuff with their cinematography that I really liked.
he had pointed it out to me, and what happens in that episode in True Detective is it starts in a house and a fight breaks out and there's gunfights and everything's happening all at once, and this camera is basically
It's
the
the
raid.
through the
and
it's
the
following.
cameraman is basically walking backwards for this whole sequence of just
It's
like starting.
It's like a 5-minute scene where they bust through like 4 or 5 houses, and it's all like fall. It's
Yeah.
fantastically done.
I love well done cinematography like that, where you do or something about those long cuts is really, really impressive, just from a technical aspect.
When I was a kid and I would watch the Oscars and the Emmys, and they'd have these awards for cinematography and everything, I'd be like, that's boring. Let's see who Best Actor and Best Film is.
Yeah,
And now
I
as an adult, I'm like, fuck Best Actor, fuck Best Film. That's all political. Best Cinematography and Best Score, those are my favorite ones every single time.
Well, because Best Actor and Best Film very much tend to be like, oh shit, we snubbed this person a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's time to give them a win.
Like when Leonardo DiCaprio got it for The Revenant, and you're like, well, I guess, but what about every other movie he's made for the past 10 years?
Al Pacino landed it for Scent of a Woman, which is
Yeah.
not a great movie, but it has a lot to do with the fact that he didn't get it for The Godfather.
Yeah.
So I mean, the Oscars are political. I don't watch them. I have no real interest in them. I couldn't tell you any films that were in them this year.
Same thing with the Grammys.
Yeah,
The Grammys are
exactly.
absolutely
Grammys are.
similar.
I think it's even more obvious on that aspect because the artists are willing to like Kanye is the first one that everybody's going to immediately think of. But our artists are willing to say, "This is fucking stupid. Why isn't anybody doing about this?" And then
we had several this year that said, "I'm not even going because this is stupid."
Well, they need
1988, first ever metal.
Jethro Tull.
Jethro
Tull won it over Metallica and floored
and
everybody.
Several other amazing metal.
Motley Crue. I want to say Guns N' Roses also that year for Appetite for Destruction, which, funnily enough, during Metallica's Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica documentary for the Black Album, they were watching the Grammys during that, and Jethro Tull, like they had showed the old footage of Jethro Tull winning it, and Lars Ulrich was like, Jethro fucking Tull. Like over Metallica for And Justice for All.
Some Kind of Monster is on Netflix right now.
Yeah, I saw that, and I wanted to watch it, but I was just like, it's just going to piss me off.
I've been watching a bunch of stuff on HBO Go, because they have a bunch of movies that I've wanted to see. I saw The Nice Guys, which I could not stop laughing.
Which one's, is that the Wahlberg, Will Ferrell?
No.
That's the other guys.
That's the other guys, okay. That's...
Was it Nice Guys?
I've seen The Nice Guys. That was the one with
Ryan
Gosling
and
yes.
Russell Crowe.
Oh, yes, we did watch that.
Yeah, we watched that together.
We were fucked.
Yeah, we were fucked all the way up.
Yeah, it was good. It was really funny.
Holy shit, that movie.
That was Shane Black, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's why, because we were on a Shane Black kick for like a week, and I was like,
I'm always on a Shane Black kick.
And then we watched it.
Yeah, we were pretty fucked up for that one.
It reminded me of more of like 80s buddy cop movies.
Yeah.
And it seemed more... a lot of the movies I'm
Shane
looking
Black.
at recently, I'm comparing to older like action movies. And one of the things that's really, really getting me now compared to before has a lot to do with the fight choreography. Of a lot of the fight choreography now is going more towards like looking a little bit more realistic. People are actually like holding guns the right way and shooting with mostly, or at least to a certain degree, proper form.
Ammunition counts are something that I like to.
They're paying attention to a little
Counting
more.
bullets during John Wick is a thing.
I watched Cobra. I watched the movie Cobra recently. Which Cobra, if you don't know, is from the mid '80s. It's a Stallone movie, and it is terrible on every conceivable level. The concept is that there is a serial killer going around, like a slasher kind of killer, and Cobra is like, or Stallone's character is this.
Is this a G.I. Joe movie?
No.
You keep saying Cobra, and I'm just like...
This is like the Rose Art version of a Crayola G.I. Joe movie.
It's called Cobra because like his belt buckle or his his handgun has a cobra on it. Wow. It's awful. First off,
you've seen Over the Top though, right? I mean, if we want to talk,
no. It's more
arm wrestling movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over the Top, at the least, respects the world that they live in. Cobra does not. So the point of this character...
This is coming from the guy who loves Demolition Man, by the way.
I've seen Demolition Man twice this year.
It's been a short year thus far.
February, Lemon.
We watched Demolition Man, oddly enough, immediately after we watched Cobra, and I was talking to my wife, and she was like, and I was like, this is on again. You must be so mad. And she's like, no, this one's good. And I'm like, which movie do you think this is? And she's like, no, it's Demolition Man that I hate. And right after that, they go to the line where they say, they call him the Demolition Man. And she's like, son of a bitch. She was so mad. It was so perfect.
Speaking of shitty choreography, you made me think immediately of the Rocky movies, like the original Rocky movies.
They don't hold up.
They don't really, and then...
I mean, as a story, the first one holds up, but all the other ones
after
don't.
Rocky Balboa came out, I found out that Stallone had gotten his nose broken during the filming of that movie, and I was like, you never could have convinced me of that, because I saw the movies, and he never even got touched by a human being.
The only one that they actually did, they did a long cut in Balboa.
Yeah.
Where I've watched the director's commentary, and it's Stallone obviously talking about the movie, and he's like, we wanted to do the first round 3 minutes without any cuts, and we actually put the sound. They put the sound of the gloves hitting them only when the gloves actually connected, which he admittedly was like, we didn't do in the other ones because he's like, it's a fucking movie. But he's like, we wanted to respect boxing in some way because we had the HBO logo on there. We wanted to really, do it. And then after that, they went into Rocky boxing.
All right. So I got to tell you about this movie because this is important and it's going to drive me crazy if I don't.
Cobra.
Cobra
Commander.
Stallone's character is like the cleanup crew. He's like the best at what he does, and the rest of the force doesn't appreciate him because he's real rough and tumble. And whenever he goes in, the body count rises.
I've got 10 weapon systems on me. How many do you need?
Exactly. So, like, he's like that cop that they just don't respect because he's too noir, because he just makes too much of a mess of things.
Damn it, Cobra, you're a hothead.
So anyway, there's like this serial killer that he thinks is multiple people. Now, the MO of this serial killer is they only use blades. They don't hunt out he doesn't hunt a certain type of person. He just kills indiscriminately with like some kind of handheld weapon. And then midway through the movie, Cobra like tails the person, and he ends up being right. It is a cult kind of group.
Right.
And then they just start shooting up everything.
So
and I'm so irritated because
it sounds like a thriller, and then it turns into 90-degree angle into like
straight up action movie.
Yeah, into whatever that movie, I forget it, the Schwarzenegger movie where he needs to get his kid back.
Yeah.
Commando. It turns into Commando.
So like they stop respecting what the villain's thing is midway through. On top of that, there's a scene where like they find Stallone's character in his apartment and they try to kill him, and he kills 2 of them. And then the next scene is him at the police precinct trying to explain that there's multiple killers, and they're like, there's no proof of that. And I'm just sitting there like, there's 2 corpses in his apartment right now. It's awful. If you ever get the opportunity to watch this movie, skip it. It's...
He just reminded me of the exact reason why I loved Last Action Hero so much is because of how self-aware it was of those tropes.
Right. That one was super self-aware. This one is super not.
That sounds like the exact opposite of Last Action Hero, which makes that sound really, really bad.
It is. All right, the climactic battle is in one of those spark factories where it's just like metal sparks, random hook chains.
They must have had that left over from Terminator. Too.
It looks like it's...
Or Batman.
Yeah.
Like any of like, God damn it.
They don't build anything, just like sparks and lava.
They're taking like grind like saws and just on shit like for 8 hours.
Why
a day,
are they paying people to do this?
24 hours a day,
Yeah.
3 shifts. They're just in case somebody decides to come through. They're like, Cobra's coming, ramp it up, guys.
Yeah, it's awful. It's so stupid. I couldn't.
You feel better, Brian?
Yeah, thanks.
So I do want to say this. We've mentioned it the past couple weeks, but after having completed more than 1 season now, if you're listening and you have not yet watched The Man in the High Castle, I strongly urge you to watch The Man in the High Castle on Amazon Prime. This show is one of the best fucking shows I've ever seen in my life. It is so good.
I watched the second season in 2 days.
Really?
Yeah.
It makes you care about characters. Like, in the first couple episodes, you're like, okay, fuck that guy, and fuck that guy. And by the beginning of season 2, I was like, what are you about? You're my favorite character now, and I don't know how to feel about you.
So, I'm only up to episode 4 because I'm also up to, like, episode 160 of Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
It's got its priorities in different places. That's good.
They're not wrong, they're just different.
They're just not right. And the main... One of the main male protagonists, I found myself, or like there's a turn at the end of the first episode, and then he seems to be having a redemptive arc immediately
You're talking about Joe
following
Black,
that.
aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the Jewish character who I love just because
Frank
Frank is absolutely fantastic.
Frank is definitely the best part of season 1, I would have to say.
He's got the most actual development, I feel like.
Obergruppenführer is the best character, I think.
Absolutely.
Like, John
Obergruppenführer John
Smith
Smith is 100% my favorite
Joe
character.
Blake, even though I think they wanted him to be the main character in the first season, I think they really were like, this isn't working, and then they kind of like put him back.
I love his.
They've definitely played with his development. In multiple ways.
There's a certain part, and it probably has a lot to do with my own family history that really draws me to that character. Just because there is a certain amount of unwilling protagonist involved in him. where he just doesn't want to be, where he just doesn't want to shake any chains. He doesn't want to rattle the cages.
He's just trying to keep his head down and keep a low profile.
And after a very, very short period of time, he realizes that you can't live that way in this world.
Oh man, you ain't seen nothing
like,
yet about him.
He's really just like, I don't want to do this, but I have to. But I really don't want to do this. But if nobody else does this, then nothing's gonna. He's really conflicted.
He started kind of ancillary to Juliana and Joe, and then
the
even
first
over
couple
Group
episodes,
and Fuhrer. But he, out of everyone that you've seen so far, he gets the most development in season 1, probably. Him and probably, honestly, the Kempeitai Chief Inspector.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about him, but the trade minister and the chief inspector of the Kempeitai are also very compelling.
Trade minister's probably my second favorite character, just because he seems like the most noble character in the show. Period.
He's 100% your moral compass.
Yeah, he is. And
without him, you'd be like, does nobody have any moral? You'd be like, what the fuck is happening? Am I watching Game of Thrones?
Yeah, it's like he's there to give
it's essentially your Jon Snow.
Let's see here. What else have I seen? I watched Popstar Never Stop Not Stopping, which is by the Lonely Island Boys. It is really, really funny.
Is it?
It's not a great movie.
Okay.
In the sense that
that's better.
In the sense that it's trying to do Spinal Tap, but it's kind of difficult to do Spinal Tap as well as Spinal Tap.
Spinal Tap was done so well.
Exactly. But, I mean, it does a really, really good job of looking at the music industry and pointing a finger and saying, this is really, really idiotic.
So it's not just a vehicle for jokes the same way Sandler's movies had been for years.
This is a vehicle
that's what it looked to me. It looked to me like Sandberg was trying to cash in on a movie and make it a vehicle for really bad jokes and make a lot of money.
No.
That's why I didn't give it any sort of...
No, honestly, it's trying to do a modern-day Spinal Tap, and it does it pretty well. And it has moments where it's really, really silly. Like, there's a really, like... There's, like, this kind of action sequence where, like, they tell them to cut the cameras off, so it's nothing but audio, and then they're attacked by, like, giant bees. There's flamethrowers with just a black screen.
That's intriguing.
It's just a really, really well-done joke. And, let's see here. I watched Central Intelligence, which is the Kevin Hart Rock movie. And it's not, once again, not a great movie, but it does what it does very well. The Rock and Kevin Hart have pretty solid chemistry, and you do kind of wonder whether or not one of the main characters is who he says he is, pretty much until the end. Which is surprising, because most of those movies are very much, here's what's happening, you don't have to think too much
like
anymore.
21 Jump Street, essentially.
You just made me realize, and I hadn't thought about this when you're talking about chemistry, kind of unexpected chemistry. I never realized until just now that I want to see a movie starring The Rock and Terry Crews.
Yeah,
I think
awesome.
I think that's the best movie that's never been made.
You watched This Is the XFL.
I did watch that. We'll eventually talk about this.
Yeah, so I was going to say,
we're all just letting it stew a little bit before we talk about it.
2 weeks, we still haven't done anything. Have you watched any more wrestling?
No.
Okay.
I heard the TLC was not great, so I skipped it.
Elimination Chamber?
Elimination Chamber,
I didn't even know the name of the pay-per-view. That's how unimportant... It was good.
Okay.
The SmackDown
I'll go back and watch it.
The SmackDown and the Raw following were better.
Okay.
Bray Wyatt pinned Cena cleanly.
Nice.
In a triple threat, which means that Bray Wyatt is 100% like...
Right.
They're really like,
he put him
this
over.
is it. Yeah. So that's what I was really, really excited about.
And this is the one thing that I've watched that was really, really important to me. I would like to talk about it a little bit more next time. But Eagles of Death Metal have a documentary on HBO right now, which is about the terrorist attacks at Paris. For those who don't know, or the attacks that happened 2 years ago, where there was the attack at the concert, there was one at a soccer game, and there was another one...
Because they didn't build a wall.
Somewhere. I don't remember what the third location was right now.
That's what it was.
Eagles Death Metal was the band that was playing when shots started being fired. And this goes through the origin in Eagles Death Metal, how Jesse Hughes, Boots Electric, ended up, or was good friends with Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age, became the band that they are, kind of like the band's origin story and what all of that meant to him, as well as what happened that night and how the people who were involved dealt with it. It's super well done. It's really, really, really moving. If you are a fan of rock and roll or anything along those lines, then it is 100% worth the watch. It's fantastic. It is incredible. It's one of those handful of things that, you know how like it's really, really difficult to kind of keep focus anymore and just like do one thing at a time?
Yeah.
I started watching this with the intent of like playing on my iPad and stuff, and after like the
It's one of those
first
things
2
where you-
minutes,
you put, like, you
my
can
iPad
actually-
like I remember setting it down and not looking at it again.
I've had some moments like that where you just like put your whatever down and you're just like, all right, this is how it's gonna be now. Like,
But it was beautiful, like really, really beautiful.
Well, I don't know about you listeners, but I'll be checking that out, and maybe we'll talk about it next week.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.